On Monday morning, November 1st, 1897, in Washington, D.C., the new Library of Congress building opens to the public. The air in the entrance halls is cool and mineral, as if the stone is still remembering the quarry. Outside, the city is bright with late autumn light. Inside, the brightness becomes theatrical, caught and redistributed by polished surfaces, by bronze railings, by the pale geometry of a staircase that rises as though it were the building's true purpose. The official explanation is straightforward. A national library needs circulation. People must move from entrance to reading rooms. Crowds must be handled without confusion. Yet the first contradiction is visual. The grandest interior space is not a reading room. It is not a stack. It is the stair, vast, ceremonial, engineered to make the visitor's body feel small and deliberate, as if each step is part of a prescribed rhythm. And then comes the archival anomaly, the kind that does not announce itself with missing pages, but with quiet omission. Beneath this palace of public assent, a second circulation system existed, an underground passage designed to move books mechanically between the library and the Capitol. It is the same building, telling two stories at once. Above, a monumental stair that turns motion into ceremony. Below, a hidden conduit where knowledge is transferred like freight, out of sight, at speed. Dust drifts in the angled light. Footsteps produce a soft echo that repeats longer than it should. Somewhere behind a door that looks decorative, there are service corridors, voids, shafts, spaces that do not appear in the visitor's mental map. History remembers progress, but forgets what it replaced. The camera holds on the stair's landing. The scene flickers, like a restored film reel catching on a splice, then cuts to another continent, another decade, the same architecture of ascent appearing again. On the evening of January 5th, 1875, in Paris, the Palais Garnier is inaugurated, and the building's most famous interior is not the auditorium. It is the grand staircase, white stone rising in multiple flights, splitting and rejoining, framed by balustrades that guide the eye as much as the body. Gaslight and early electrical ambitions hover in the background of the era. What dominates is the choreography of movement. Arrive, ascend, pause, be seen. The official story is not secretive. Opera in 19th century Paris is social order made visible. The staircase functions as a public corridor widened into a stage. The architecture is explicit about this. Landings placed like platforms, sightlines engineered so that people see each other more than they see the building's mechanics. The stair does not merely connect floors, it connects status to visibility. The artifact anchor is simple and well documented. Drawings and engravings of the staircase show it as a central organizing device, an interior boulevard. In the era's public descriptions, what matters is not speed but procession. A wide stair controls crowd flow without forcing it to feel controlled. It moves large numbers of bodies while preserving the illusion of individual choice. If there is an archival tension here, it is not a missing blueprint, it is a political timestamp embedded in stone. The project is commissioned in one regime and inaugurated in another. The building's timeline is interrupted by war and governmental change, yet the staircase emerges intact as the building's symbolic heart. The records are consistent about the opening, but the public memory often compresses the timeline, as if the staircase appeared fully formed in a single moment, rather than through years of planning, excavation, and delay. A human trace survives in the way contemporary observers describe the experience. They treat the staircase as the place where the evening truly begins, where the crowd's murmur becomes part of the performance. The era's habit of description is itself a witness line. The staircase is repeatedly framed as the theatre before the theatre. The recurring motif enters quietly, footfalls on stone, a soft metallic hum from fixtures, the echo of many voices blending into one sustained interior weather. And the first observation forms at the edge of the factual. When architecture insists on procession this strongly, it is not only solving movement, it is shaping attention, tuning the crowd's rhythm the way an instrument is tuned. By the end of the night, the staircase has done its work. The auditorium can be dark, the stair remains luminous. In the archive, it is called circulation. In the building, it is choreography. If history is written by survivors, who erased the rest? By late spring on May 25th, 1869, in Vienna, The opera house opens on the Ringstrasse, a new imperial boulevard built to present the city as orderly, modern, and monumental. The Vienna State Opera's staircases are part of that civic theatre, broad flights that carry audiences upward with a sense of inevitability, framed by stone and ornament that suggests permanence even when politics do not. The official record here emphasizes urban planning and cultural prestige. The opera is a state signal. Vienna is a capital of music, discipline, and display. The stair is therefore not an afterthought, it is a civic interior street. It handles the practical reality, hundreds of bodies arriving within a narrow time window, while converting that logistical problem into a ritual of ascent. The artifact anchor is the building itself as a designed object on a designed boulevard. Entrances aligned, stair halls positioned to receive crowds without compressing them into panic. In architectural logic, stair width is also safety egress capacity, disguised as grandeur. In this telling, the giant staircase is simply the honest solution to a 19th century crowd. But there is a documented tension that complicates the calmness of that explanation. On December 8th, 1881, another Viennese theatre, the Ring Theatre, burns catastrophically. The disaster becomes part of the city's safety memory, and it changes how staircases are discussed in public life, not only as ceremonial routes, but as the thin line between order and crush, between exit and entrapment. Here the records do not contradict each other. They deepen. Before fire, the stair is prestige. After fire, the stair is also indictment, a reminder that ornament and gaslight can become hazards, that doors and corridors are not neutral design choices. A human witness line survives in the documented controversy surrounding opening night choices and public discussion, the sense that even the language of performance is political. People in 1869 are not only attending an opera, they are attending the state's self-image. The staircase carries them into that image. The environmental element is Vienna's late spring air, mild outside, cooler inside. The building holds temperature the way it holds sound. Stone keeps the days chill. Voices carry up the stairwell in a way that feels engineered. The contradictory timestamp that produces unease is subtle but real. The building is opened in a single ceremonial moment. Yet it belongs to a longer urban project that began years earlier. Public memory prefers a single date. Architecture tells time differently. The stair begins to look like more than a corridor. It is a resonant chamber for crowds, a place where thousands of small sounds become one sustained interior hum. Not magic, not proof. Simply an effect that 19th century architects could feel, even if they described it in older language. Atmosphere, dignity, awe. The camera cuts on the echo of footsteps, and the echo becomes the transition. A staircase can be a celebration until it becomes a lesson. If history is written by survivors, who erased the rest? In February 1895, in Boston's Back Bay, the McKim building of the Boston Public Library opens to the public, and the rhetoric surrounding it is unusually explicit for a civic project. This is not framed as storage for books alone. It is framed as a public monument, a place where knowledge is made architectural, where the city builds a physical argument about who is allowed to ascend. The official record is consistent. The library is planned, funded, and constructed as a central civic institution, shaped by trustees, architects, and public debate. The giant staircase belongs to that civic logic. Libraries need circulation, yes, but they also need threshold. They need to convert the street's noise into interior discipline. A monumental stair is one of the simplest technologies for doing this. It slows the body and changes posture, turning entry into transition. The artifact anchor here is not a mysterious machine. It is documentation of governance, dates of decisions, ceremonies, construction phases. The trustee's authority to choose an architect is recorded. The project unfolds with pauses, cost concerns, and adjustments. Even the cornerstone ceremony exists as a formal timestamp, an attempt to lock intention into stone. The archival tension, importantly, is not a missing record. It is an exposed seam in the record, a postponed cornerstone ceremony that reveals how carefully civic projects manage their own symbolism. Public architecture does not only get built, it gets staged. A human trace appears in the paper reality of the project. People argue, authorize, hire, and react. The 19th century leaves behind not only buildings, but minutes dry language that nonetheless contains emotion if you listen for it. Impatience, pride, fear of waste, fear of inadequacy. The environmental element is Boston's winter light, which enters low and pale. Dust in sunbeams makes the air look textured, as if the building is already old on opening day. The hum is quieter here, less theatrical than an opera house, yet the acoustic motif persists. Footsteps and murmurs rising up stairwells, becoming a soft interior weather. One alternative interpretation suggests that civic monuments often imitate older forms of sacred architecture. The stair becomes a secular pilgrimage, ascent toward quiet, toward regulated attention, toward the disciplined act of reading. For those who read alternative historical frameworks seriously, this repetition, stair, dome, echo, procession looks less like style and more like inheritance. Official history calls it Beaux-Arts influence. The alternative interpretation suggests something like continuity of an older design language, repurposed into institutions. The camera lingers on the stair's landing, the film flickers, another city appears. They called it a library, but built it like a temple with a stair as the altar rail. If history is written by survivors, who erased the rest? On a cold day in 1877, in Philadelphia, people begin using a city hall that is not yet complete. The structure will not be finished until 1901, but the city moves into it early, occupying parts of a building still under construction. This is not an urban myth. It is a documented timeline that produces a peculiar kind of architectural double exposure, a functioning government inside a long, unfinished monument. The official story emphasizes scale and ambition. Philadelphia builds a vast masonry city hall, heavy, ornate, intended to dominate skyline and civic identity. In this explanation, the giant staircases are simply inevitable. A building with many rooms, courts, offices, and public chambers must move bodies vertically. In the 19th century, stairs are reliable, legible, and safe, at least in theory. The artifact anchor is the building's sheer material reality, masonry mass, a layout that implies repeated vertical circulation. When a structure becomes this large, stairs are not one thing. They are a system, and that is where the anomaly begins to form, not as a contradiction in the record, but as an overabundance in the object. The archival tension is a matter of interpretation rather than missing evidence. If stairs are only for access, why do so many civic buildings devote such prime interior volume to stair halls that feel ceremonial rather than merely functional? The records of construction do not need to be inconsistent for the question to arise. The building itself asks it. A human witness line can be taken from the way civic projects are described in contemporary urban life. Observers repeatedly treat the building's scale as a statement, something meant to be seen as much as used. The city hall is talked about as a symbol, and symbols need interior stages. The environmental element is Philadelphia's winter air, dry enough that footsteps sound crisp. Light enters through tall windows and catches dust, making the stair halls look inhabited by floating particles rather than people. The hum of the building is mechanical only in the smallest ways: radiators, distant doors, the friction of many coats moving past stone. The contradictory timestamp is explicit and unsettling, occupied from 1877, completed in 1901. Which is the real building an organism lived in for decades, or a finished monument declared complete on paper? The archive insists both are true. A staircase that must operate for decades, while construction continues, becomes a stabilizing spine. It is the one part of the building that must work reliably, even as everything else changes around it. The camera cuts on a long shot down the stairwell. The echo carries forward, and the next scene is not a city hall, it is an entire city made of stairs. On May 1st, 1893, in Chicago's Jackson Park, the world's Columbian Exposition opens, and a new kind of architectural contradiction becomes public spectacle. The official record is clear. The fair's grand buildings are largely temporary, built to last months, not centuries. And yet photographs and descriptions show staircases, colonnades, and monumental approaches that look like they were designed to outlive the weather. The artifact anchor is the fair itself, nearly 200 new buildings in a neoclassical mode, arranged around canals and lagoons. It is an engineered city of sightlines, reflected light, and ceremonial movement. And in that city, stairs are everywhere. Broad approaches, grand interior flights, platforms that elevate the viewer into the illusion of permanence. The official explanation for the stair abundance is practical, crowd management and spectacle. A World's Fair is a machine for moving millions of visitors. Stairs distribute bodies across levels and direct attention toward exhibits. In a fair designed to impress, vertical movement becomes part of the performance. The archival tension appears when you hold two truths together at the same time. The fair is temporary, yet its architecture imitates permanence so convincingly that it reshapes American civic taste. The record does not lie. The tension lies in intention. Why build temporary stairs at monumental scale rather than simpler ramps and platforms? A human witness line survives through the collective description of visitors. The fair is remembered as a white city, a dream city, an ideal city language that reveals how completely architecture can override awareness of material reality. People describe the experience as if it were a vision rather than a construction schedule. The environmental element is Chicago's seasonal swing opening in spring, closing on October 30th, 1893, under colder light. The fair's plaster-like surfaces catch sun in a way that looks almost electrical. At night, illumination turns stairways into glowing channels. Footsteps become the acoustic motif again. A million footfalls, the sound of a population moving through an invented city. For those reading alternative historical frameworks seriously, the fair looks like a resurfacing an architecture that arrives fully developed, globally familiar, and then disappears, leaving behind photographs that feel like evidence of something larger than a seasonal event. Official history explains the style through Beaux-Arts planning and neoclassical revival. The alternative interpretation suggests the fair was not inventing a look, but reactivating one using stair and dome forms that appear across continents in the same decades. No conclusion is claimed. Only the sensation remains. A temporary city built to feel eternal, and stairs used as its most persuasive language. The camera holds on a grand stair with crowds ascending, then dissolves into another staircase, older, darker, built after a fire. On September 16th, 1884, in Odessa, a foundation stone is laid for a new opera house after the earlier theatre was destroyed by fire in 1873. By October 1st, 1887, the new building is completed, and the narrative of the staircase becomes inseparable from the narrative of loss. A public interior rebuilt as if the city must prove it can still assemble beauty after disaster. The artifact anchor is the opera house's dual identity, a performance space and a technological object. The audience hall is designed for acoustics so sensitive that even a low voice can carry an effect documented in descriptions of the building's sound behavior. The staircase, in this context, is not merely a route, it is an antechamber to a space where vibration matters. The official explanation for the staircase scale is again practical and ceremonial. Crowd circulation, the dignity of arrival, separation of flows, artists, patrons, staff within a complex building. But a documented detail introduces a different kind of tension. The building is among the first in its city context to employ modern illumination infrastructure. In the late 19th century, lighting is not a decoration, it is a system with wiring, safety issues, and power logic. Now the staircase reads differently. Wide stair halls are not only about people, they are about air, heat, and visibility. A stairwell is a vertical volume that can carry light downward and heat upward. It can act as a chimney for smoke in emergencies, but it can also act as a stage for new technologies, lamps, fixtures, electrical conduits displayed where the crowd will see them. A human witness line appears in the way people talk about the building's acoustics and atmosphere, treating the interior as unusually alive to sound. Whether or not the average visitor knows the engineering, they feel the effect. Their remarks preserved in the building's reputation become a kind of testimony. This is a place where the building itself participates. The environmental element is the Black Sea air dampness outside, a cooler dryness inside. In transitional seasons, fog can make exterior stone look softened, while interior light sharpens edges. Dust in the stair hall catches illumination and turns it into visible beams. The recurring hum returns, now plausibly electrical. Faint vibration in fixtures, the soft insistence of a powered building. The stair becomes a candidate for an alternative reading, a resonance corridor, not in the sense of mystical energy, but in the sense of architecture shaping vibration and attention. The camera cuts as a door closes. The echo rings a fraction too long. Another parliament, another dome, another set of stairs. In 1885, in Budapest on the Danube's pest side, construction begins on the Hungarian Parliament building, and the project carries multiple public timestamps. Inaugurated for the millennial commemoration in 1896, keys handed over in 1902, fully completed in 1904. The building is not shy about vertical movement. It contains an entire inventory of stairs, dozens of staircases alongside elevators. The official story is national symbolism rendered in Gothic revival mass. The building is designed to be seen from the river and approached as a monument. A giant staircase inside such a structure reads, officially, as the interior equivalent of the facade, a device for moving officials, guests, and public visitors through layers of ceremony without collapse into disorder. The artifact anchor is architectural abundance, corridors, courtyards, gates, staircases, a building designed as a city in miniature. In this context, the stair is not a single object but a repeated form, replicated until it becomes a pattern. This repetition is itself an anomaly worth examining. One staircase could be justified by ceremony. Dozens begin to resemble a system. The archival tension is documented in the building's staged incompletion. It is publicly inaugurated before it is finished, then continues to be worked on for years. The record is consistent, but the experience is contradictory. The nation celebrates completion, while craftsmen and engineers continue building. Architecture becomes a performance, with ongoing backstage labor. The environmental element is the Danube's light reflections shifting, winter fog or summer heat depending on the year, but always water nearby. Inside, stair halls hold cooler air. Stone absorbs sound. A distant metallic vibration, railings, fixtures adds to the recurring motif. Hum, echo, static-like ambience in large volumes. The contradictory timestamp is explicit, 1896 inauguration versus 1904 completion. The building belongs to both dates, and the gap between them is not an error, it is part of the phenomenon. Public architecture often declares itself finished because it must function symbolically before it is functionally complete. Across continents, in the same decades, states and cities build domes, vast stairwells, and resonant halls. Official history explains diffusion. Architects trained in similar schools, styles traveling through publications, imperial competition. The alternative interpretation suggests convergence, a shared design grammar that may be older than the institutions using it, repurposed into parliaments, opera houses, and libraries. No proof is claimed. Only the pattern is noted, a building with too many stairs to be merely convenient, and too much ceremony to be only practical. The camera holds on a stair landing beneath a dome. The film flickers. We cut back to Washington, where a staircase sits above a hidden tunnel. On November 1st, 1897, in Washington, D.C., the new Library of Congress building opens, and within days, the reality of moving knowledge becomes physical. Accounts describe materials and volumes in transit, lining corridors, occupying floors, turning the building into a logistical problem disguised as a monument. The official story praises beauty, national ambition, and the dignity of scholarship. But the artifact anchor that changes the interpretation is infrastructural. A purpose-built underground tunnel linking the library to the Capitol, designed to carry not people but books and to carry them mechanically. The system is described in the language of engineering. Tunnel dimensions, apparatus, communications, It is a 19th century solution to a modern problem: information needing rapid transfer between institutions. This is not speculation. The tunnel existed, the apparatus existed, and that reality reframes the staircase above it. The building contains two forms of movement: the ceremonial ascent of the public and the hidden, accelerated circulation of documents. The staircase becomes the public face of a circulation philosophy, while the tunnel is its private backbone. The archival tension is the way these two systems are remembered differently. The staircase is photographed, toured, praised. The tunnel becomes a footnote, sometimes partially removed or disrupted by later construction, sometimes absent from the visitor's story. It is not that the archive is missing. It is that public memory edits infrastructure out in favor of spectacle. A human witness line appears in the opening day descriptions of disorder. The building as a working organism, not a finished museum piece. This matters because it shows the stakes of movement. Stairs are not built large only for elegance. They are built large because bodies and objects must be moved in bulk, repeatedly, under time pressure, without panic. The environmental element is the interior climate. Cool stone, warmer pockets where people gather, a faint smell of paper and plaster. Dust becomes visible in beams of light. The acoustic motif intensifies, footsteps above, mechanical vibration below, two layers of hum. The pairing of grand stair and hidden tunnel invites an alternative reading that does not require fantasy. It suggests an older architectural habit. Monumental public circulation above, service circulation below. The camera moves from the stair down into darkness, then cuts abruptly to a World's Fair decades earlier, where another machine of vertical movement is introduced, the elevator. In 1854, in New York City, at the exhibition of the Industry of All Nations held in the Crystal Palace near what is now Bryant Park, Elisha Otis demonstrates a safety mechanism that will change how cities build upward. The scene is documented and often retold. A platform, a rope, a deliberate test of failure, and a device that prevents catastrophe. Vertical movement is no longer limited to the human leg. The official story is technological progress. The elevator enables taller buildings, denser cities, new economies of height. In that narrative, the staircase should become secondary, an emergency route, a service path, a leftover. And yet, as the 19th century progresses, giant staircases do not disappear. They multiply. Opera houses, libraries, parliaments, courthouses, buildings that could integrate lifts, still devote central volume to monumental stairs. The artifact anchor here is the paradox itself. The elevator arrives as a radical convenience, but the staircase remains the symbolic spine. This is not a contradiction in the record. It is a contradiction in expectation. Technology changes what is possible, but institutions often keep what is persuasive. A human witness line can be inferred carefully from the logic of public demonstrations. A crowd gathered to see proof. Otis does not sell a device by describing it. He sells it by making fear visible and then neutralizing it. The environmental element is the Crystal Palace's light. Glass and iron turning daylight into glare, heat building in the interior, the air smelling faintly of metal and crowds. Later, the structure burns, reinforcing another theme of the century: fire as the shadow partner of progress. The persistence of giant stairs after elevator technology suggests that their purpose cannot be reduced to access. Official explanations remain strong. Stairs manage crowds, provide redundant egress, symbolize dignity, and remain reliable when machinery fails. The alternative interpretation adds a second layer. Stairs shape human behavior, pacing, and attention. They are analog control systems inside stone institutions. They regulate the body's tempo the way a metronome regulates music. The film reel flickers, and the next scene is far south, in a city building an opera house over decades, still designing the stair as if it were the true machine. On a cool day in 1889 in Buenos Aires, the cornerstone is laid for a new Teatro Colón, and the project stretches across decades, shaped by delays, deaths, and redesign until the theatre opens on May 25, 1908. The building becomes a late echo of 19th century monumental logic, European trained architects and global prestige. translated into a South American capital determined to appear inevitable. The official story is cultural ambition. Opera houses are not only about music, they are about state confidence, civic identity, and international legitimacy. The staircase in this context is both practical and symbolic. It handles arrivals. It separates flows. It turns the public into a visible audience before they become a listening audience. The artifact anchor is the opera house as an acoustic object. Such buildings are engineered for sound behavior, geometry, materials, volumes. Theatres of this era are obsessed with resonance, audibility, and the controlled distribution of vibration. Now consider the staircase through that lens. A stair hall is not neutral space. It is a tall, often hard-surfaced volume that carries voices and footfalls upward. It is a place where sound becomes architecture. The archival tension is in the timeline and authorship. Multiple architects contribute. The project's intent remains consistent while details shift. The record is not inconsistent. It is layered. The building is a palimpsest of decisions, and the staircase becomes one of the few elements that must remain stable across those shifts because it organizes everything else. The environmental element is Buenos Aires near the Rio de la Plata, humidity and river air, cool evenings, heat in summer, light that can turn stone a warm, pale color. Inside, dust floats in the lamp's glow. The recurring motif returns, the hum of fixtures, the echo of shoes, the soft static of a crowd becoming one sound. The recurring global pattern becomes difficult to ignore. In Europe, in North America, in Eastern Europe, in South America, institutions build giant stairs as if they were installing a necessary organ. We do not claim the mechanism is mystical. We only note that it works because institutions kept building it even when other options existed. The camera cuts to the early 20th century, when the staircase's role shifts again away from prestige and towards survival. On Saturday afternoon, March 25th, 1911, in Manhattan, New York City, a factory fire kills 146 people at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. The details are documented relentlessly. Floors high above the street, exits compromised, panic compressing human bodies into fatal geometry. In the aftermath, stairwells and doors become subjects of investigation, reform, and public outrage. This moment matters because it changes how giant staircases are culturally justified. In the 19th century, monumental stairs are framed as dignity and ceremony. In the 20th, stair design becomes inseparable from life and death egress logic. The official record of the Triangle Fire does not speak about opera houses or parliaments, but it reshapes building culture. It forces architecture to admit what it always contained, that circulation is not neutral, and that design decisions have consequences. The artifact anchor is procedural. Reports, reforms, memorialization, the conversion of a disaster into code. The staircase becomes a device that must function under terror, not just under applause. The archival tension here is not missing data. It is the painful consistency of data. Evidence that doors were locked, that routes were inadequate, that safety had been treated as secondary. The archive does not wobble, it indicts. A human witness line survives through documented first-hand descriptions of the event and its horror: people watching, people trapped, people falling. The public record preserves the human reality. Young workers, many immigrants, bodies reduced to numbers but never fully erased. The environmental element is the early spring day, ordinary weather that becomes irrelevant in minutes. Smoke becomes its own atmosphere, blackening stairwells, turning air into an obstacle. The acoustic motif changes, not the elegant echo of footfalls, but the chaos of screams, alarms, and rushing steps sound as panic rather than ceremony. The Triangle Fire helps explain why so many older monumental stairs later become cordoned, altered, subdivided, or reinterpreted. Once stairs are understood as evidence of safety or failure, institutions become less willing to treat them purely as social theatre. The giant staircase is domesticated. It is made compliant. Sometimes it is visually preserved while its openness is removed. For alternative historical interpretations, this period becomes a point of silence not because records vanish, but because architectural intention changes language. What once might have been discussed as atmosphere, procession, resonance becomes discussed as code, egress, compliance. The same forms persist, but the vocabulary shifts, and when vocabulary shifts, memory shifts with it. The film reel flickers on a stairwell dark with smoke, then cuts backward in time to Paris, where an entire archive burns, and a city rebuilds its ceremonial staircases over ash. On the night of May 23rd to 24th, 1871, during the Paris Commune's final days, the Hôtel de Ville burns, and with it, the city's archives and administrative memory turn to smoke. Photographs survive, the shell of a civic building blackened, windows empty, stone exposed like bone. Here, erasure is not a metaphor, it is documented destruction. The official story that follows is equally clear. The city decides to rebuild. Between 1874 and 1882, the exterior is reconstructed in an enlarged form that echoes older design, while the interior is substantially modified. This is civic continuity enforced through architecture. Paris insists that its governmental face will return, even if the original records cannot. The artifact anchor is the photographic record of ruin, and the later rebuilt facade, two images that do not reconcile into a single comforting narrative. The contradiction is visual. A building can be restored, but the archive it held cannot be reconstructed from stone. The staircase in this context becomes a symbol of a different kind of continuity. When a city rebuilds ceremonial spaces after political trauma, it is not only restoring function, it is restoring legitimacy. A monumental stair is one of the simplest architectural ways to communicate that legitimacy. Order restored, ascent restored, the state returned to its place above the street. The archival tension is explicit and documented. The destruction of archives creates gaps that cannot be filled. That absence becomes fertile ground for interpretation, not because the records prove secret technology, but because the record's very incompleteness invites alternative readings. A human witness line survives through the nature of the event itself. People inside a building, wounded and escaping, others setting fire as defeat approaches. The documented action is a human trace strong enough to carry emotion, the deliberate burning of a city's memory. The environmental element is May, heat and smoke, sky darkened, air dry enough for flames to run. The acoustic motif returns as an inversion, not the elegant echo of a functioning stair hall, but the roar of combustion, the cracking of beams, the collapsing rhythm of a building failing. We cannot claim which interpretation is true beyond the documents, but we can show what is visible. The archive burns, the ceremonial architecture returns. The staircase rises again as if the city cannot govern without assent. The film reel ends this passage on a rebuilt landing, clean stone over a missing record. Return to Washington, D.C., and hold the camera steady on the Library of Congress stair hall, as it exists across time. Built in the 1890s, opened on November 1st, 1897, admired ever since. Now add what the visitor does not usually see beneath the admiration. The tunnel logic, the service corridors, the apparatus thinking. Then add what later time does. Parts of hidden systems are altered, disrupted, removed, or simply forgotten in public storytelling. The official story for giant staircases, when compiled across the 19th century, is coherent and strong. They manage crowds. They provide reliable vertical circulation before universal mechanization. They symbolize institutional dignity and power. They enforce separation of flows, public, private, staff, officials. They assist light distribution and interior climate in an era of evolving building systems. They provide redundant egress when fire, panic, or mechanical failure occurs. This is already a real reason, and it is enough to justify much of what we see. And yet the anomaly persists. The staircase is not merely adequate. It is excessive again and again, across continents, across building types. Even when elevators exist, the stair remains central. Even when buildings modernize, the stair remains the photographed heart. A human witness line exists in every modern visitor who unconsciously slows on a monumental stair. They lower their voice. They straighten posture. They look upward as if permission is required. This is not proof of hidden technology. It is evidence of design working on the body. The environmental element is the building's constant interior weather. Cool stone, warmer air where people gather, dust in light, the faint metallic scent of railings touched by thousands of hands. The acoustic motif completes its cycle. Footfall echo, soft hum, the static-like presence of a large interior volume holding sound. The contradictory timestamp becomes the story's final unease. These staircases belong to specific dates, openings, inaugurations, ceremonies, yet they also belong to a longer timeline of repeated form. The archive can tell you when a building opened. It cannot fully tell you why the same architectural grammar appears in so many places so quickly. Here is the alternative observation, serious and unproven. One interpretation suggests that giant staircases are not only about moving bodies, but about tuning them, synchronizing crowds through rhythm and resonance, shaping behavior through acoustics and scale, producing compliance without force. In this view, the staircase is a low-tech control system, an inherited architecture of governance that works regardless of the ideology housed inside the walls. Official history calls this psychology, taste, and institutional symbolism. The alternative lens calls it continuity of a deeper design intelligence, an older template adapted to new empires. We do not claim certainty. We do not announce revelation. We only show the pattern. Stone stairs built like infrastructure, repeated across continents, paired with domes, halls, and hidden service systems. Stairs that remain central, even when alternatives exist. Stairs that make modern people behave as if they are entering something older than the institution itself. The camera returns to the 1897 stair hall. The light flickers once, like a damaged frame in a restored reel. The sound of footsteps fades, then stops mid-echo, as if the film has ended before the last step lands. In the archive, they are called stairs. In the body, they are called ascent. If history is written by survivors, who erase the rest?